Hello all friends. Welcome to the Story Friend channel. For you lovers of action films, this time I will present the film The Warrior's Way, which was released in 2010. Prepare snacks. Sit in the most comfortable place. Let's watch the film. Starting from a man named Mike, who is a swordsman who has spent his whole life practicing. He aspires to become the best swordsman in history. Long story short, after going through hard training, he finally found a swordsman. Mike meets a swordsman. He is a swordsman who has the greatest title in the world today, where the man can finally kill the swordsman very, very easily, making the man the only swordsman in the world. But now he is the most powerful man in the world. The man feels emptiness inside himself, when there is no enemy who is stronger and able to match him. And what has happened is that all his training and goals have changed instantly when he saw a baby girl who is a child of an enemy clan, where a humanist side and conscience suddenly appear, which makes the man find a new purpose for life. Namely to protect the baby and keep him alive full of obstacles. Like the Ryu warriors who are not very good at it, then grandmother unaware of the age that intends to kill him. The man remains consistent until he thinks that this land is no longer safe. He decides to meet his old friend in a western country with the aim of spending the rest of his life with the baby, and this is the way of a warrior.
For a new life, the man changed his name to John, according to my name, until finally John arrived in a bankrupt town that was deserted and run down, where his old friend lived, who apparently died long ago. Meanwhile, we will see the great teacher, who is the leader of John's clan, where this great teacher is checking the last place where John stopped, and finds a paper that is a clue to where John went. Let me explain a little that this John is part of a group or clan that is most respected. He is a kind of clan of killers, where their clan has been involved in feuds for hundreds of years, and the only descendant of their enemy clan who is still alive is the baby he is carrying. The John, so that indirectly the John is considered a traitor to his own advertisement, in which this great teacher intends to hunt down the baby, which of course the John will not let that happen.
John tidak akan membiarkan hal itu terjadi.
Back to John with the baby who lives abandoned in a foreign land. Soon a kind woman appears who wants to offer him a job to become a woman's clothes washer. She is named Lynn, a woman who lives alone in this bankrupt city. John's first day at work, he was visited by 3 young men who asked John to wash their clothes, which when these young men were arrogant in front of John. Even though if they knew who John really was, I guarantee they would be scared while running. And let me tell you a little that most of the residents in this small town are talents or circus players, who have their own skills, including Sillin, who has the ambition to become a knife thrower. But it seems he is not ready enough to do that, plus there are not enough visitors became the main factor why this city went bankrupt. John began his happiness by learning to wash clothes, then expanding or drying his clothes, then playing with the residents there, followed by planting flowers which were rather impossible to grow, until John found peace that had not been she ever felt.
A few weeks passed, the flowers he planted are now thriving, where John himself is seen playing cards with Dom, in which Dom often loses bets because he has difficulty seeing the payment from John's empty eyes, when he sees Lynn who is alone. In the middle of the grave, Dom also told me that when Lynn was a child, he actually had a mother and father and a baby sister, whose family had been killed by an evil colonel who had slaughtered them all so sadistically. The evil colonel who had slaughtered them all so sadistically. The colonel also said that he often looked for young girls who had intact and clean teeth to be used as an outlet for their sexual desires. But when the candle that became the victim Lynn was desperate to douse the sicolonial with hot oil, which made him angry, and killed all of his family, Lynn himself was thought dead by the colonel. But it turned out that the bullet did not hit a vital part that allowed him to survive until now. Sympathizing with his past, hundreds of lives, and is now in a sealed condition. so that he does not return to being the person he used to be without him realizing that the great teacher is also on a boat trip and will soon meet John to take the baby's life back to John, who was training Lin to use a knife, where John felt himself coming back to life and having a real family, and living happily in the small town until one day when they all had a party. Some people used horses and destroyed the flower garden, which turns out to be a group of criminals under the leadership of a psychologist. Back to the John who was training Lin. Finally he felt alive with them, he thought of them as family and he was happy to live with them, until finally one night they had a party, and suddenly a bunch of criminals came, which turned out to be the Colonel's group. Now the colonial uses a mask to cover his ugly face due to absorption of hot oil, where the aim of the colonial there is to find a young and clean woman who will be used as an outlet for his lecherous lust. One of the citizens who wears clown costumes is the target of the colonial, and his troops continued to kill a husband and wife only for reasons that were unclear and very confusing. Then it was completely unexpected that Lin still remembered the person who had massacred his family, for then Lin dressed up quite beautifully and intended to take revenge. Knowing that Lin was determined to meet the Colonel was alone, John all along silent and witnessing the Colonel's heinous actions finally decided to intervene. Where John opened the seal on his sword, he was immediately recognized by the professor. This great teacher immediately knew the location of John opening his sword because he intended to hunt down the Colonel, until he was about to die. Delighted by many people, John appeared who immediately slaughtered all of his men. Using Lin, the Colonel managed to escape from there, which would endanger the entire population of the city, because it was certain that the Colonel would return with more troops. John did not remain silent. All residents worked together to devise a strategy that could at least minimize the attack from the Colonel. Tomorrow's story arrives. All the residents are in a position where they have prepared mines that can blow up all the Colonel troops, and how surprised they are when the colonial forces bring in hundreds of cavalry that is beyond their expectations, and John is at the forefront to welcome and kill them one by one, wielding a sword in his hand. But with so many troops, John had a hard time covering all of them at once, where other citizens including Lin and a baby had to escape from the Colonel's pursuit, and what happened next really shocked everyone. Because suddenly the teacher with dozens of warriors coming, who did not hesitate to slaughter them all just to get the baby. There was a war between the two camps, namely warriors against the Colonel's troops. The professor had to fight the Colonel's weapons. John himself continued to protect the baby and Lin, and in where he got into a fight with some swordsmen, of course very easily defeated by him. In this chaos, Lin also entrusts the baby to Dom, where Dom must also be killed by the Colonel, who is trying to catch the baby so that the Colonel still has a guarantee to live. And no matter how many Colonel's troops and no matter how sophisticated his weapon, still no match for the sword of the greatest warrior in human history. And the most interesting thing is that John apparently has a speed that exceeds the speed of the bullet. Rescuing the baby. Not wanting to be killed just like that, John also gave Lin a chance to take revenge, where the two of them got into a battle which of course Lin won. After all the colonial troops and warriors died, now is the time for John to face the great teacher, alias the person who had trained him since childhood, and outside John was pitted against the skills of his own teacher, which is we know that from the start I had the heart. It seemed that John was the greatest swordsman in the history of mankind. For sure his teacher would die easily. And that's what happened, and his destiny as an assassin and swordsman cannot be abandoned. To go for the sake of achieving his goals, and after traveling to the Antarctic continent, John also met dozens of ice warriors who wanted them to play alone or even in a crowd. 100% would still win because he is the main character, in the end.